Look, I get it. It's slow, the animations are repetitive, it's grindy, it's impossible to get immersed. There are dozens of valid reasons to not like turn-based combat. But there are games that I feel are made specifically for people who don't like them, and today I'd like to introduce some of them to you. Firstly, there's Octopath Traveler 2, which if you're averse to the genre, I understand that visually looking at this game, it might evoke negative instincts. And while the game is certainly built on a nostalgia for games that perfectly encapsulate what you don't like about these games, Octopath 2 is a game made in the style of those games, but for a modern audience. Firstly, there's the structure of the game. Where other turn-based games will throw you in a multi-hour dungeon with repetitive combat that can drive you insane, Octopath 2's dungeons are 30 minutes on the long end. These dungeons are bite-sized, but admittedly repetitive. But the brisk pacing means that they will never overstay their welcome. The true delight of Octopath 2 comes from the bosses. See, a lot of the monotony of turn-based games comes from how pitiful regular enemies are, posing almost no threat to the player. But Octopath 2 stuffs itself to the brim with boss fights that require tactical strategy and engagement to overcome. You can't just spam attack and be done with it. You have to respond to the boss's unique abilities. And Octopath 2 is filled to the brim with boss fights. The game has 8 protagonists, each of which has anywhere from 4 to 6 chapters. And every single one of them ends in a boss fight. You will spend more time fighting bosses than almost any other activity in the game, creating a turn-based game with more engaging content than you will find in every Pokemon game put together. Add on top of it the modern garnishes like a fast forward to get you through animations quicker, and you have a stellar example of a turn-based game for people who aren't fond of them. But if your issue with turn-based combat is immersion, then Octopath is not the place to start. That would be either Metaphor ReFantazio, Persona 5 Royale, or Persona 3 Reload. While my argument for this section can apply to all 3 of these games, Metaphor ReFantazio is the least grindy of the 3, so I'd suggest starting with that one. The issue with turn-based combat and immersion is how it completely takes you out of the experience while characters are simply waiting for their turn in combat. While there's no solution to that issue from a gameplay perspective, Atlus has figured out that it can be nullified by making the turn-based combat as absorbing as possible. This is done through the studio's trademark style, which envelops each encounter in a sharp, elegant tone that makes the simple act of navigating the menus a joy to experience. The satisfying clicks of confirming an option blend wonderfully with the exquisite and energetic music tracks that play during every encounter. It creates a rhythmically tactile feel to picking your options that will have you tapping your feet and humming along to the infectious tracks. These games simply exude so much style in battle that even taking down the most pathetic enemy is a visual and audible joy to behold. What's more is that these games give you the option to significantly cut down on the amount of time you spend selecting the same attacks over and over. By default, all party members aside from your main character are controlled by the game itself, and you have to go into the settings to switch them over to manual control. But the game never forces you or encourages you to do this, so feel more than free to have your party members be controlled by an AI to always use the most effective moves in combat. It can be annoying how they'll waste their strongest moves on filler fights, but you can also edit their strategies so they operate however you desire. But if you just really need to be constantly pressing buttons and moving around during battle, then look no further than Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is a perfect jumping on point for the storied franchise due to the new protagonist and gameplay style. The big selling point of Like a Dragon's combat is how every single attack except for your most basic one requires a button input to be more effective. This means every single turn will involve you not only selecting the move, but matching the timing of the prompt to make sure you don't have a single second to relax during battle. And said moves are without a doubt the most entertaining in turn-based history. One of the standouts is the homeless man who attacks with pigeons, and it only evolves from there to get more and more absurd, with such an overabundance of classes and super moves that you will never see them all in a single playthrough, to the point where your reward for leveling up becomes simply seeing what other kind of wacky ideas they had for these characters to unleash on unsuspecting goons. What's more is that you have manual control over your character's position during combat, and this allows you to knock foes into allies to perform a follow-up, creating a much more dynamic feel to battle. So if you were turned off by turn-based games due to a negative experience with Pokemon, Final Fantasy, or a Dragon Quest in your youth, I assure you there's a plethora of games that have been made to address all the issues that plagued those older titles, and I'd encourage you to give any of the options I just listed a try. I'll be back in 2 days. In the meantime, here's a video going more in depth on how Like a Dragon has perfected QTEs in turn-based combat.